Hello, my name is Nathan Nasser, and this is my senior project presentation. I will be discussing socioeconomic status and reading fluency. The agenda today is that I will be discussing my thesis statement, my background research on the topic of my thesis statement, tools and resources to help solve the problems for teachers that I discovered when doing my research, and a reflection on my own learning experience and growth opportunities that I received while doing this project. Low socioeconomic status has a distinct effect on reading fluency. What I expected to find during this course of research is that it would be a distinct negative effect, and that, at least that was my hypothesis. And I was in general correct, and whatever I say after this is really pretty much unimportant. Just you need to know that there's a distinct negative effect. My background research. These quotes will cover a variety of topics, but mostly saying that if you're coming from a low socioeconomic standing, that you're going to have a harder time with literary skills. So, like this one on the top left is students from poorer homes did far worse than their peers at oral and comprehension literacy skills. The one below that, children's initial competency is correlated with their parents, their learning environment, and the books that they own. These are all important factors that will be discussed later on in the presentation and what affects a child. This quote covers a topic that's going to be very important later. Daily guided literacy activities imparts reading and comprehension strategies that are essential for developing skills. Research continues to link lower socioeconomic status, that's what SES means, to lower academic achievement and slower rates of academic progression. All these three quotes say is coming from a poorer home has a distinct negative effect on your ability to read and the skills that you need to develop. How are students affected? Students are affected in two chief academic ways, and those are reading and math. Reading and math, if you're coming from a poorer home, are the first two things to go. Followed by that are social emotional delays, which is interaction with your peers and learning how to read people and interact with your fellow humans. Boys and girls are affected differently. Boys are actually hit harder than girls when they're both coming from comparable poor homes. And a quote down here, studies suggest that early social skills are linked to future literacy achievement. Several reasons have been suggested for this, but it also is tied to their ability to understand where somebody else is coming from in more advanced texts. Why are these students so affected? These students are so affected because they have a lack of support at home and at school. School life, the teacher is trying to catch them up, but they're not actually developing the skills. They're more parenting them and teaching them what they need to do than how to do it in an academic setting. Home life, typically isn't very healthy and doesn't actually promote education when you're coming from a poorer background. Or at least that's what statistics show. There are exceptions to that rule, of course, but most of the time those are the exceptions, not the rule. Another huge factor in why students are affected is parental education and the culture around education that they're coming from. These typically, education isn't as valued as highly as it is in higher earning households, and this affects the kids of those homes, and then they're less likely to achieve academically, and that starts a vicious cycle. And later on, we're going to be talking about on how to break that cycle, or at least start on the pathway to breaking that cycle. How can we as educators do our best to get rid of the effects of coming from a poorer home? Or how can they be addressed at least? We can differentiate work. We can still be covering the same standards and goals that we have for the rest of the class. We might just need to change their work so it's easier for them to understand. Giving the students extra time to complete work, especially work around reading and math when they're coming from poorer homes. And also getting them into pull-out and intervention groups to help them develop the skills that they are lacking currently. These are all key factors that were talked about in a quote earlier, and that how we need to develop literary skills by having daily practices and having practices that actually are impactful in their literary circles that they're going to be running. The benefits of support for these kids. You have a lower dropout rate in future students when you actually impart small group or pull-out group learning. Then you have improved social emotional skills, and like we talked about earlier, that'll actually help with them developing the skills of literacy. And somewhat important to this topic, improved academic performance, and this will also help them with their own kids later on down the line. This is when we're going to be talking about breaking that really negative and vicious cycle that comes from lack of education in our society. Research today suggests that early literacy and math skills are significantly predicted by children's predictors of children's subsequent academic achievements. So that's what we want to do, is improve their academic achievements for their future. So we're now in the tools and resources section of my presentation. All of these tools and resources are meant to be either used and taken home by students, or be easy to use for the teachers. Like right here, we have short and long vowel early readers for these kids to help them develop phonics, their ability to read well and speak clearly. We also have with that lesson plans and slides for the teacher to help lower the barrier of entry for a teacher teaching phonics in their classroom to students. We also have clear instructions on whisper phones and how to build them for your own class if you don't want to spend as much money with the pre-made ones from somewhere like Amazon or Shein or Temu. We also have templates for line separators for your kids that get lost in the text repeatedly, and how you can, and we'll talk about how all of these tools are helpful later on for either the students or the teachers. So, this is an early reader, and how this reader is meant to be used is it's meant to be either taken home by the kid or be a classroom resource. This is a printable book that can be sent home. And how this reader is going to be read is, we're going to go the boy pet a cat. And then when they're going through that reading, you're getting the repetition of the words and the phonics that they're supposed to be. The phonics, the sounds that they're supposed to be reading. And then they're going to go through 3 times, and each time they're going to fill out one of these smiley faces. And then when they do that again with the other ones, go through this book. They go through this book and they fill out each one of these circle smiley faces. They fill it in with, in this case, because this is laminated, they can fill it in with an Expo marker. And the teacher can send this home as an at-home assignment for the kid, and they can possibly just have it for themselves or bring it back as a homework assignment, and the teacher can possibly reward them for finishing this assignment. My apologies on the technical difficulty. So this is the second volume that this is the second volume to the one I showed you. This is for the long vowel sounds, and it mechanically works the same, but it is somewhat more difficult for children because there are some larger words used, like unicorn, in them. But this is for once they master the short vowel sounds that they can move on to the long vowel sounds. And this is what the phonics slides look like. There's one phonics slide for each short sound, each short and long sound that we have. So what this is going to be done as, how this is going to be done is you have the mouth shape, and you're going to, as the teacher up here, you're going to go, eh, and you're going to point out how your mouth is shaped and how it's so important to actually keep that the right way. And then you're going to go with all the class, eh, eh, eh. Then you're going to turn to a neighbor, and you're going to look at their mouth, and they're going to go, eh, eh, eh. And you're going to be watching your neighbor to make sure that they are keeping the proper mouth shape and they're making the right noise. Then, during this time, you are supposed to actually, then together, you're going to read it. You're going to read it. Bed. You're going to all say bed, bed, bed. Because that's helping them give context for the word. Then, you're going to have your students come up with their own short E words in this case. But that's what you do with all of them. Then we oh, I forgot to discuss the whole point of these slides. Why I made them how they are. This is meant to make the teacher's life easier. To give them an opportunity to help their children, well, their students, grow. And to make it easy for these teachers to just pull this up and start chugging away on their phonics. To give these kids a chance to have a high academic level of achievement. Which isn't everything in life, but it does help in all other aspects of your life. Oh, did it again. This is the phonics lesson plan. It has a little bit more information than the phonics slides did. We have, of course, what we're actually covering, what sound we're covering. Then we have the rules for that sound. And then we have the teacher's script about how this lesson is supposed to look, and we just work through that together. And there's one of these mini lessons for each sound that is covered in the phonics books. These are supposed to be paired together to help students and teachers. This is a whisper phone, and this is a whisper phone right here. And these are clear instructions and list of materials that you're going to need when building one, out of PVC at least. You don't necessarily have to make it out of PVC, but you can also make it out of, if you really just in an emergency, you can cut up two toilet paper tubes and then cut one at 45-degree angles and tape it to the main tube. And then they can use that as a whisper phone for themselves. And what ideally would happen is you would pair it with the next resource, with the line separator. This is just a quick template just to make teachers' lives easier, because it's kind of annoying to line up these little grooves for cutting them out. You pair the line separator with the whisper phone, and so the kid doesn't get lost, and can also read to themselves to help make sure that it makes sense what they're reading. Ideally, what you do is you pair the line separator with a kid who has dyslexia or just easily gets lost in the text. That's the main purpose for it being here, because I know a lot of kids have ADHD and a lot of kids have dyslexia, and they get lost in the text and they get confused about where they're supposed to be. But this will help limit the amount of information that their brain can take in, and so they can't get lost as easily. Or at least that actually helped me quite a bit. And like I said, it's actually supposed to be paired with the phonics book and the whisper phone, so the kids can read to themselves and they don't get lost in what they're reading. My reflections, this was really difficult for me actually. There was a really, really steep learning curve because I'm coming out of a secondary education, specifically history, and the learning curve for going from history to phonics is immense. And it's a really different way of teaching than what I'm used to. And it's, of course, very different material. And it really made me look at how I have been teaching and how I need to change how I teach for my students, and how I don't always understand how the students are struggling. It might be that I'm not properly educating my own students because they don't have the basis they're working from if they get behind in early grades. So that challenged me a lot actually, was that I may be a flawed teacher in that. One of the severe learning curves, again, was that people don't like saying that poor people have a harder time. And it was hard to find numbers on how poor people are affected differently than people who have more money. And that really surprised me. I feel like that's something we should be open about as a culture, about how our poor are actually affected by not having education, why we need to value education. The implications of this are that students of lower socioeconomic status need help. They really do need quite a bit of help. And I'm trying to equip fellow educators on giving them the tools they need. They may already have the book knowledge to actually educate, and they may actually have the field experience to educate. They just don't have the actual tools yet. And that's what I've been trying to do with the tools that I made. And overall, this was a really amazing learning experience for me as an educator and as a person, that I need to be better in how I teach. And it really changed me as a person, I think, actually, when going through this and looking at how devastating poverty can be and how it can become a generational issue. And that made me really, well, what I will be doing with my resources is posting them out there for free for people who are looking for resources. Teachers, home educators, so that they don't have to spend money on it, because they may not have money to spend on it. So I want to give back. And I wanted to just say thank you for, oh no, I'm not done yet, actually. Summarize, the fact of socioeconomic status on reading is that if you're from a lower socioeconomic caste, you will most likely struggle reading, and you will most likely struggle throughout the whole time you're in the education system. An effective way to combat low socioeconomic status is early intervention, and is fast, especially focused on math and reading. How tools and resources will help. These tools and resources are meant to help actually build the skills that they may have missed or may have fallen through the cracks with. And that is important because these kids need education to help better themselves and foster an education, foster a culture of education within their own homes. And that is one of the goals of all these resources. Thank you for your time, and thank you for everything.